The biggest complaint of Viper Strike with the Mamba is that the build feels too melee, and honestly, I don't like that about it, and I agree. However, the version I'm sharing today solves that completely and without sacrificing the power we've grown to love. What's up, YouTube? It's your boy AP, and today we're going over my absolute favorite Mamba setup. This build prioritizes strike range and comfort above all else, and the result is a setup where you tap the attack button and the entire screen pops, no aiming required. It's stupidly powerful, insanely smooth, and genuinely plays like the one-button comfort build it is. And if you're worried that I sacrifice power to make it feel this great, just watch the B-roll. We're tanking Uber Exarch balls, every single move in the Uber Elder fight, and really, all of these pinnacle bosses are reduced to being a joke. And that's because I don't believe in fixing what isn't broken, and the Sublime Divine Flesh setup that Jungroan put out in 3.26 is just as good as the day he made it. We're leveraging all that defensive package to trivialize Uber bosses, T17 map combinations, and it's just a very well-rounded defensive setup. Now, there are also key differences here, which we are making to bring Mamba into patch 3.27 more powerful than ever. The max hits in PoB are still pretty insane, and clearly it's not just PoB shenanigans. Real-world gameplay, you're just as good as you would expect. We are shifting all LE damage onto our Lightning and Chaos res, and in this patch, you can really easily raise max Lightning as well as max Chaos all the way up to 90%, which means we mitigate monster penetration, free up a lot of suffix pressure, and we are also just massively reducing all incoming damage. Now, for quality of life, the build I'm sharing is unquestionably the least melee of all Mamba guides I know of. We scale strike range by all means possible, and the result is our attacks hit 3 meters out, which is almost 3 times further than normal. I'm even willing to sacrifice some damage to push this out further by swapping in Awaken Melee Splash for everything except Uber bosses. This essentially gives us melee explosions that have a satisfying crunch and a really nice radial hit to massively increase coverage as well as range. The advantage of this is not only pushing our attack range closer to the edge of the screen, all of our additional strikes will have this large AoE, so where we would otherwise hit maybe 5 times, instead we're hitting 50 to 100 times per attack in any sort of juice content. The implications of this is that we have a massive multiplier to life gain on hit, which we will gladly leverage for overcoming certain map mods. Another upside of structuring a character like this is that we can brute force through the avoid poison map modifier as well as the avoid attacks, since Mamba only needs one hit to blow up the screen, and it's basically impossible not to poison or hit unless it's a single target. And you can still cheese a single target with the Worm Flask or Ball Breach if necessary. With this build, there will never be straggler mobs. I don't even think about aiming my hits. The gameplay consists of me tapping attack as I'm moving my cursor between the loot and picking up all the drops. It's truly one button, and the rest of the stuff you see on the skill bar is just there for visual cues of how many exerted attacks we have left, as well as obviously the Whirling Blades and Flame Dash as movement options. Now, people will ask, what is the difference between this and the mana sacking variant? The main difference is that mana sacking goes mana on the prefixes, and I go strike range on my prefixes. You can be the judge of what crafting is easier. I heard crafting for mana sacking is pretty hard. I wouldn't say crafting for this setup is easy either, but I have personally gone out of my way to craft very custom gear with exactly the prefixes, suffixes I wanted, and there's just so much power on this build. You can peel it back, and the crafting will be easier. I don't think you'll be disappointed going either version, but I just want to stress that I'm greatly prioritizing the comfort and playability of this setup, and a lot of that won't show up in path building the same way boosting damage or defenses would, which both builds have a lot of. Alright, I've made a shopping list for you guys, so let's get into that next. This is my shopping list. You can find it linked in the video description, and let me know in the comments if you approve of my use of dark mode this time around. Alright, so I got the uniques, the clusters, the self-crafted rares, and there are no gems. You got to grab that from the path of building. My actual build cost is close to 500 div, but don't let that intimidate you because my character is fully min-maxed. It can't really get improved. You could go as low as 82.7 divines, although realistically I'd say you probably want 100 because again, like gems aren't included and stuff like that. First up, we have Progenesis, which is the best defensive flask in the game, made a lot better on Pathfinder because Pathfinder has really good recovery to negate the downside, and it also scales Flask effect to improve the defenses even further. That's almost a quarter of my budget, so I'm saying you can just skip it because realistically, the core part of the defenses that are mandatory, or as Jungroan would say, non-negotiable, are pretty good by themselves. So we have Sublime Vision, Purity of Lightning to convert 30% of Fire and Cold onto Lightning. The Watcher's Eye with a max roll converts 20% over to Lightning. And then the Glorious Vanity Divine Flesh converts 50% of all the elemental damage over to Chaos. So we're taking no fire and no cold, and we just naturally get 90% maximum lightning res on this setup. You don't have to do anything crazy. So we're reducing a ton of that damage already. And then the Doppelganger works super well here because, first of all, it mitigates physical hits, but it also greatly reduces chaos damage taken. So we're mitigating that chaos damage, which by default is 80%. And you can boost that up to 90%, but I would say don't worry too much about getting the chaos to 90% because, again, Doppelganger helps pull the weight here. And if you want to cut some corners, that is a decent place to start. All right. So yeah, we got the 11 Divine, Sublime Vision, Purity of Lightning. For the voices, if you pay 45 div, you basically get 2 passive points back because the free one, which is 5 passive, takes up 2 more passive points. So you can start off with the 5 passive, that's fine. Doppelganger, if you get single corruption, which I would say either get +2 to duration if you want a lot of damage, or 50% reduced crit damage taken if you want better defenses. That's 20. If you get both of them together, it does get expensive. Focal Point is a lot of damage, but I guess you could skip that. Chaos Inoculation, Wormhole Jewel. Now this pairs with the Despair on Hit Ring. I don't think you can automate the Despair on the Battle Mage's Cry because it's going to either do Alchemist Mark or Despair. So we have to settle for a level 1 Despair on hit. And this is really good when the map mod says like +30 chaos resistance, because this is going to reduce it by 15. You can watch all of these self crafts, by the way, on my VODs channel. I just had like about a 10-hour stream where I was crafting everything. It might have been less than that actually. So this is both optional. You don't need Despair on hit ring. You can just get a basic ring. Ashes, the quality does a lot for us. It improves the uptime of our exerted attacks. Like if you don't have an exerted Alchemist Mark attack, you do basically no damage. So that's a reason why Ashes is so powerful. And it's a downside of the mana version. But you can overcome that by getting stuff like War Cries are not exerted through travel skills. In fact, we do it on our build anyways. This is cheap. Just don't get a perfect roll. Tides of Time is basically free at this point of the league. For Cluster Jewels, this is a big cost to the build because I'm using Megalomaniacs that give us low tolerance plus Born of Chaos. Born of Chaos is a small cluster node which gives us +3 to maximum chaos. You could opt to do a regular low tolerance medium cluster with a small cluster. Obviously, when you do this, it's not efficient with skill points. You could, as I said earlier, just ignore scaling max chaos res. So you could just cut this completely and save skill points. But the ideal situation is you get low tolerance plus either Born of Chaos for the chaos res or Enduring Composure for free endurance charges. And then since we have 6 spaces for medium clusters, the last 3 are just going to be alt spammed low tolerance, which is really easy to hit. Alright, as I said earlier, I don't really want to get too into these self-crafts. You can look at my gear and see what I'm up to. You can also watch the VOD of me crafting them all. I didn't do any of this off stream, so it's all documented. And I have some approximations on those here. We'll look at what the gear looks like in-game in a second. And we have, if you do want to alt spam the daggers, we have a regex here. And the other way is using essences. Before hopping in game to look at my character's gear, I want to go over map and alter modifiers, because our character can run all of them. However, it might not be obvious to newer players how to overcome some of the more difficult ones. The first one being reduced defensive for Frenzy Charge, which is an Eater Worlds mod. The issue is we use Eldritch Battery to attack as well as cast spells, and this can lower our energy shields so dramatically that we won't be able to do anything. So the solution here would be to simply toggle off Arctic Armor for that map and use your mana pool instead. And if you do this, you may also want to spec a point into Life and Mana Leech on the tree. It is the lead up point to Clever Thief. You could also take Clever Thief to make it better. The alternative is also just unsocketing Blood Rage for that map. Next up would be monsters' chance to avoid poison or monsters' chance to block attacks. The issue here is hits no longer always do damage, and the solution is something I talked about in the intro. I highly suggest using Awakened Melee Splash on everything except for Uber bosses because it forces hundreds of hits onto mobs, and then you won't even notice this. An alternative solution would be the Attack Mastery, take off the strike range for monsters cannot block for that map. And for map bosses, which are single target, you either kill them slowly, which is my recommendation, or you can do something drastic like Vala Breach or the Worm Flask to force multi-hits with Woke Splash. Next up is Reduced Life Recovery, which is an Eater mod as well as a map mod. And the issue here is with a lot of increased effect, your Life Flask will do almost nothing. And the solution here would be to turn off Petrified Blood because you can't leech past your Petrified Blood. The way we are getting our life above Petrified Blood normally is through the Life Flask, but the Life Flask no longer works. And if you have Petrified Blood on and your Life Flask doesn't work, it's not really doing anything because this delayed damage can't even be recovered by your Life Flask, and you take a lot of extra damage from dots when you're on Petrified Blood. So, thankfully, our ring has a lot of life gain on hit. When combined with Woke Splash, that gives us like 1,000 life per attack. So we don't need to have the life loss for this map. And this could be an issue on the Ziggurat boss because there's literally minutes of that fight where he's immune. And if you have reduced life recovery on your flask and he's immune and you're taking this damage, I mean, you can't leech it back. And also, no, and that's basically it. That's the main issue. It can be dangerous on immunity phases. Next up is the mod Players Gain Reduced Flash Charges. The issue with this is if Replica Sword of the Divine runs out of charges, you cannot attack. So the solution would be, again, turn off Arctic Armor and have your mana as a backup. But also another solution is just be mindful that you have this on your map and run through the map quickly and efficiently because we kill so many monsters so fast that realistically you can just play the map efficiently and this won't be an issue. But it does become a problem again on the Ziggurat map boss because Katarina has all these immunity phases and our flasks are just continuously going, so they will run out on Ziggurat. Finally, reduced effect of non-curse auras from skills. You have to be careful here because Purity of Lightning is giving us max lightning res as well as a bunch of just regular lightning res. So for my personal situation, I am still overcapped of lightning res. So I just need to make sure I'm not grabbing the Eater World's Altar that reduces lightning res because I'm not so overcapped that I'm able to do that. And your max res goes down to 86, which is still very comfortable. So it's not a big issue, just be a little mindful that you do have overcap lightning res enough to handle it. On to the POB. I don't want to spend too much time in here. We have the high damage number, very high max hits, high recovery. None of that is fake. I mean, clearly you can see from the B-roll we can do stuff perfectly fine. As for the skill gems, this is on the bossing setup right now, and I would recommend you not use overexertion, instead use Awakened Melee Splash for almost every type of content. You could actually even just take off Fortify instead. You may not be getting max Fortify stacks, but realistically, your damage is going to be good regardless of which one you take off. This damage does drop quite a bit without overexertion, but the funny thing about Viper Strike of the Mamba is that the damage is not being calculated correctly because we have a 20% chance to deal 100% more damage and it's averaging that out. But with the Awakened Melee Splash, you're just hitting so many times, and only one of those hits needs to proc the 100% more damage. So you are doing a lot more damage to this while clearing And then obviously for single target, this is more accurate. Although again, it's like 20% of the time you're doing double damage, and then 4 to 5 hits, you're doing quite a bit less. So it's still a little bit misleading. Yeah, let's go into game. All right, so looking at my gear, we have the 2 daggers, and you can craft these through alt spam or through fracturing. The alt spam is very, very frustrating to do. You're going to want to have a ton of these daggers because you're going to delete dozens and dozens of these before you get one. And then you take my regex found in the shopping list and you just alt spam, go through them. If you hold down shift, you can just alt spam everything, and then you press alt and it's going to switch the currency to augment, and then you augment the ones that you're able to do that on. And I would honestly just recommend watching the VOD on the VOD's channel for this, because realistically, I don't know if I'm going to make a standalone video on all these crafts. Depends on the demand for that. But yeah, it's what you do is when they get highlighted, it's either going to be T1 lightning, cold, or fire, or T1 dot multi or chaos dot multi. And when you get that, you need to annul it down so it's only the mod you want. And then on the crafting bench, if you have a T1 prefix, you're going to want to craft a veiled suffix. So an example of a veiled suffix would be like double damage. And then an example of a veiled prefix for the dot multi on the other dagger would be creations one. Anything that you can get from a veiled chaos orb. And then you just slam them together. So here's an example of one that was slammed together. And then once you do slam them together, you gotta remove the crafts. So this one has the prefix and the suffix, and this one also has the prefix and the suffix. Unfortunately, they're both lightning damage. You need to have like lightning with dot multi and then say fire with dot multi. And once you end up with that, it's like a 25% chance. And whenever you're recombing either the first step or the second step, never do this variation where it's like 5% chance. You do the 100% chance for success, but realistically it's 25% chance that you end up with 3 modifiers. Because what you want to end up with is, you know, the double prefix and the suffix, and then you craft on hits can't be evaded in either chaos dot multi or attack speed. Attack speed does not increase our damage, but it does give us dex and int, which you may need. The reason for going attack speed is it makes whirling blades faster. Hitting with the daggers faster doesn't really matter because there is a duration that needs to expire with the poison regardless. As for the rest of this gear, I've said it before, but I do really recommend just watching the VOD on the VOD channel if I don't put out a crafting guide. So suffixes are very flexible. A lot of the stuff I'm doing on this glove is just purely for damage. The poisons you inflict deal damage faster is a delve only mod, and that's a lot of damage. An abyssal socket lets us grab a lot of flat damage, which scales very well with our build. And if you're on a budget, you can just skip that. Prefix though, we're getting the strike range and some life. And on the implicits for the glove, it is important to get the strikes 2 additional targets. And you get that by using Orb of Conflict to raise the 1 strike up to 2. The boots, there is a crafting guide on my playlist for Peacock and Mamba. These are just generic avoid element boots. Nothing special here. We crafted this helmet last league. Now, I went for a very specific one where I wanted to have strength as well as suppression. So in order to do that, you have to use a strength essence until you hit suppression. And then I did not get the T1 lightning. I had an open suffix and I went for reforge lightning, and I went for suffix can't be changed, reforge lightning, and I just lucked out and got T1. At this point, um, you're gonna wanna do suffix can't be changed, but since your suffixes are full, you can do the wild bristle matron and then just reforge life on the bench until you get a satisfying amount of life. And then you just hit it with the Crusader Exalt Slam. It's a 50-50. If you miss the 50-50, it gets complicated. Again, you can watch the VOD to see me do it, but I would actually recommend if you hit the mana instead of the Fizz taking as lightning, you just trash the helmet and start all over because it can be pretty hard to get back to the stage once the Crusader Orb has been used. And this is another source of melee strike range. Um, for crafting this ring, again, you really should be watching the VOD, but we can tip here, you can move curse enemies with despair on hit over to a different ring, and that is in the VOD. So just you don't have to buy Vermilion Ring with cursed enemies on despair. You can get cursed enemies with despair on hit, and then use the recombination to move it over here. And then you gotta fracture it. I was hitting it with an essence to get strength and int because we want both of those. And it was just simple reforged life, craft on some flat damage. Fugitive Ring, I wanted these 6 stats, and it's kind of hard to craft, so I just searched for it, and it literally existed, and it was cheap. um, well, the prefix gain life on hit, I had to Exalt Slam, so it wasn't exactly like this, but realistically speaking, all this ring is doing is it's giving me +2 maximum chaos resistance, which isn't important on a budget, so this ring is not important. Um, the life from enemies hit is a 50, no, I think it's like a 66% chance with Elder's Exalted Orb. And I just needed those stats, but like depending how you have your gear balanced, just get whatever you need on the suffixes. Warcries cannot exert travel skills is nice because if you're just using Whirling Blades a lot, you might run out of your alchemist mark, but realistically, since we do have ashes, it's not really an issue. It would be more of an issue if we took off ashes for, say, a Defiance of Destiny, because ashes is really speeding up our ability to auto exert the war cries in the first place. So don't feel like that suffix is necessary on this setup, but if you do notice that your battle mage's cry or your ancestral cry is running out, it'll be this one, it won't be this one, then that suffix is pretty important. As for the grafts, we have Tender Embrace Dual Graft with Damage Over Time Multiplier, which is a nice source of damage. And we have Preserving Stillness with 0.4 meters to melee strike range. You could opt for an additional strike, but I think the strike range is by far the best option. And for Preserving Stillness, the defensive aspect to work, you do need to grab the Spell Suppression Mastery. And on the topic of strike range, we have 0.4 from the graft. We get 0.1 from the craft on the gloves, 0.2 on the helmet craft. Silent Ambition is a modifier to strike range. That's our anoint. And then on the passive tree, Weapon Artistry gives us strike range, Master of the Arena gives us strike range, and the Attack Mastery gives us strike range. And all of that combined together makes the build feel so comfortable, especially when combined with melee splash as well. As for the rest of this passive tree, I haven't really touched on the tattoos. You want enough avoid stun to combine with the flask to be permanently avoiding stuns. If you have extra dex, you can put on Effect of your marks for more damage, or you can also increase the recovery of your life flask. And if you have extra int, you can reduce damage from crits. And the Glorious Vanity, this is giving us double Cult of Chaos, which gives us Chaos Res as well as +2 maximum Chaos Res. If you do not know how to find one of these, the final Peaconk video teaches you how to use the Find Timeless Jewel aspect of Path of Building. And if you, for some reason, don't need the Chaos Res, where is it? Automaton Studies is very good with the Fizz damage reduction instead. And this one has double Fizz damage reduction. But I am going for Cult of Chaos instead. And at the risk of rambling, I think we should just cut the video right now. If you guys have any questions, there's the Discord with like 7,000 players, and it's very helpful in there. And you can also just pop into Twitch, don't be shy, and I will help sort you out. Like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out a lot, and I'll see you guys next time I go live. Peace.